Hello again. I hope you are doing well, especially in these moments where everything is very uncertainly strange. In today's episode, I'm not going to be talking specifically about a person, but I'm going to start from a small biblical story which was captured and interpreted by different artists, focusing on three Baroque artists. The story that I'm going to tell you about is Susanna and the Elders, which is an annex that starts from the book of Daniel, a story from the Bible that recounts the life of Daniel, the protagonist, who was a Jewish nobleman exiled in Babylon. The legend tells the following. Susanna, a very beautiful woman who was married to Joaquin, a rich and influential man who, like Daniel, was a Jew in the Babylonian exile, one day decided to go for a walk. Some text tells that she only went for a walk, while others report that she decided to take a bath in a nearby river, in the garden of her house. Without focusing on this small detail, two men who were walking by saw her and were captivated by her beauty. These two people, like her husband, were part of the greatest spheres of power, since they were chosen to be judges among the Jews in exile. They were not satisfied with the idea of just seeing her, but rather they wanted a little bit more of her, so they agreed to surprise her. This surprise led to a constant insistence towards Susanna, of wanting her to give herself sexually to these two old men, and in the face of this she refuses and confronted them, saying, "I know that if I did this, death is for me, and that if I do not, I will not escape from your hands. More beautiful, however, for me to fall into your hands, not having done this, than to sin before the face of the Lord." These two men, seeing themselves rejected by this young woman, decided to accuse her of adultery in front of everyone, taking her to the court, where they create a false story to justify her complaint. They said they had seen her with another man who was not her husband in the orchard of her house. Given the power that these two men had, it was impossible to believe Susanna. So she was sentenced to death by stoning. Anyway, for all those who do not like sad endings, I tell you that this does not end like this, cause it has a happy ending. Susanna was saved thanks to the intervention of young Daniel, since he was able to convince the assembly of the false testimony of the eldest, thanks of a divine inspiration that he had at that moment. This story, like almost all biblical stories, was shaped by different artists who interpreted through painting the moment in which Susanna is surprised by these two old men. One of them was Peter Paul Rubens, an artist born on June 28 of 1577 in Siegen, Germany. He was one of the most important painters of this time, and he was known primarily for his biblical interpretation through oil paintings. In the interpretation of this story, a naked woman can be seen taking to get away from these two men. If you see the expression of each one, and focusing on Susanna's, I don't want to bump into anyone, but you can't really feel anything other than a woman trying to chase those two men away. This work was made between the years 1607 and 1608 and is one of the best known in relation to this story. Another of these was of Rubens' rival at the time, the artist Anthony van Dyck, born in 1599 in Antwerp, Belgium. He became known throughout Europe thanks to the perfection of the portraits he used to paint, but every once in a while he went a bit off the script. In this work, you can notice an expression of fear, and even the angry faces in the old people are impossible not to observe. One of them, it even seemed that he's warning her what was going to happen if she did not give it to the pressure. This work was from 1622 and was after the painting that I think best captures the expression and that personally has generated more for me, also thanks to the story behind the artist. Artemisia Gentileschi was born in Rome, Italy in the year 1593. She grew up in an artistic family where her father, Orazio Gentileschi, was the one who gave her first steps in paintings and colors. Little by little she began to stand out, and she always felt inspired by the art and technique of Caravaggio, the Italian painter characterized by his tenebrism style. With the advice of her father, little by little she was venturing more into the world of art, and it was when she was just 16 years old that she made one of her first large-scale works, her interpretation of Susanna and the Eldest Man. Ironically, this story had never been reflected by any woman, and it has always been focused from a masculine point of view, far from the real empathy, of what Susanna symbolized, beyond the religious factor. This Baroque painting, whose main expression is Susanna's disgust and rejection of her abuser's treats, was the same painting that generated a great revolution in the art of that time, since for the first time it was a woman who captured the feelings of what happened to Susanna. It was the first time that a woman reflected the horror experienced by the abuse. It was not accident that Artemisia painted this story. Her father organized her private painting classes to perfect her technique even more. For this, her father asked one of his collaborators to help her in this process, and abusing the trust he had in him, his already then teacher, great Artemisia locked her in the study room and sexually abused her. Given the time, this violation could have been solved thanks to the loss of those times where the person could repair the damage of the abuse, marrying the victim, restoring the honor of each part. But this was not going to happen because who claimed to be his teacher had hidden his marriage. So Horacio, the father, arranged by the situation, sent a letter to the Pope in order to take the case to the court of Rome. In this trial, Artemisia and the abuses that had been perpetrated on her were never discussed. Rather, her father demanded justice for damages caused by his assistant to him, his property, and the damage of his moral. Artemisia raised a before and an after in terms of being able to empathize beyond the male gaze. The first painting mentioned, the one of Rubens, despite being technically perfect, is a representation whose main focus is in the perversion of these two old men who erased the woman. Where more than anything Susanna's naked body stands out. There are even several interpretations in which the figure of Susanna is even seen like she was liking what was happening. You can Google it and you can see it. And the second painting, the one of Van Dyck, which I mention again that it was after the work of Artemisia, sought to try to reflect the story, now empathizing with the figure of the woman, in this case with Susanna. Although the moral teaching of the story focused on Susanna's choice to respect God rather than accommodate to the influence of evil for fear of losing everything, the story, and obviously from my point of view, reflects the concept of woman as an object whose will was not listened to and also underestimated, and it is from the interpretation of Artemisia Gentileschi and everything she had to live, who's really captured the feeling of the horror of this abuse. Artemisia, a woman who, within everything and based on the information we have about her, was able to reconstruct herself, managing to carve out a space for her in the Italian art scenes, had the courage to capture in a work the sensation that she once felt, overcoming the impediment of the times, where woman had no voice. I really don't want today's episode to be a feminist account for a story or circumstances, but I do want it to capture the great inequalities that existed, and that despite the fact that in some part of the world women are beginning to have a protagonism, deserved it, there is an equal culture that we continue to replicate without really being aware of our unfair and little deconstructive environment in which we are living. Our daily life has been transformed into a constant constructions of discourses, of speech, of which we do not take into our life, since ultimately it implies taking responsibility and admitting that we are also part of all this injustice that are experienced day by day. Well, thank you very much to listen to the podcast, to listen to this episode. You can follow me on my social medias, Louric Art in Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Thank you very much, and till the next time, bye bye.